All right. Good afternoon, folks. So, just following up with what's going on with the dLive and using OSC as a control mechanism. So, as you know, dLive doesn't communicate with OSC, but it does use TCP Midi. I'm not on the same network. I'm not at the venue, so it's not actually connecting right now. But this is how we would get the control data in and out of dLive. Obviously, those are MIDI values, and we have to take those and interpret those into OSC values. And then on the OSC side, we have to interpret them back into MIDI values for bidirectional communication with the dLive console. So we basically do this in a couple of different ways, or in one way, really. I grabbed the MIDI spec from the Allen and Heath documentation, and I have created basically this collection of commands using individual things. This is sort of my round one, so these are just things that were labeled, and then I'm actually going through and cataloging everything, as I can show you in a minute. But from start to finish, Osculator is communicating with the Allen and Heath TCP Midi driver via the TCP Midi, both input and output. And then Osculator also has MIDI input ports active on its primary input as well as its primary output, and that allows other applications just to see that Osculator is there and say, hey, I can communicate with you over MIDI, in addition to OSC ports. On the OSC side, what we have are, this is the page that I'm using for our volunteers. So like we've got our pre-show, song 1, song 2, blah 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 blah. These are sort of sound controls. These are faders on the desk. And this is for a volunteer profile that I've created on the desk. So like vocal 1, you'll see has an OSC range. Instead of going from 0 to 1, we've limited the output of this fader to an OSC float value of 0.862, which corresponds, I believe, pretty closely to 0. And then on the mains and the connection center, I've also made those so that they're limited on the input side on the OSC scaling, so that scaling never actually affects any interpretation on the dLive side. And so there shouldn't be any weirdness happening there. So I'm using channel 16 in my case. So again, what I've done is I've taken, basically I've connected dLive to Osculator, and then I came in here and moved a fader, in this case vocal 1 fader. I've got my input value showing up here, and then you can copy that and create a new message, a new collection, library, if you will. So I've got my main left right, vocal 1, connection center. You can see that all of these things are sort of labeled there. What is notable is that this last bit, we do have a substitution that we have to do. So this is a hex string, and what we are basically saying is that this hex string, whatever happens in here, corresponds to values from 0 to 127 as an OSC range. And so you can see, like, if I come in here and hit new substitution, new OSC number argument substitution, and that is the way that we're taking these strings of MIDI values for each channel and interpolating that data into OSC values that the OSC can handle, and vice versa. So that means that when OSC gets a message, and then so before we go there, so then whenever this message is received, I'm also telling it I'm going to spit out that message. So that's vocal 1 fader. And then so what happens then is in that return process, whenever the return fader is sent. It's now being mapped back to this and then interpreted back as a MIDI string. So you can see that in my main document here. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, here we go. So on the left-hand side, on these ones, these are going to correspond to like here's my sound scenes, right here, and then those are being interpreted as these dLive scene values that are in this MIDI collection. They're going out channel 16 over the TCP Midi driver. Same thing here for, let's see, fader. What is connection center fader? Slash fader slash CC. So if I search for that, slash fader slash CC, and you can see that I have the Z axis is off, so that's just whether or not the thing's being touched. Same thing here. So when I receive that slash fader slash connection center, it is sending a MIDI message out to collection 1, which is this CC fader over channel 16. And then, so if we go to this, so we should be getting it in the reverse direction. Oh, that's interesting. Destination 4 and destination 1. Destination. Oh, I see. I see. Okay. So that's okay. Okay. Here's why that was a little concerning. So when I receive the MIDI value from dLive, MIDI slash input slash collection 1 slash CC fader, it is then sending duplicate values for the back mapping. This is called back mapping. Back to the device. So in this case, iPad 1, which was my personal iPad, as well as the second iPad, which was the one that actually lives in the venue. And I've set that up as destination 1 and destination 4. That shouldn't have any effect. I believe that I've got duplicate back mapping for a number of things in here, but we'll have to have a look at that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So we've got duplicate back mapping out for a number of different devices. There's some EOS back mapping for both iPads. I think I had set up for, yeah, there we go. Yeah, all the other faders are also have duplicate back mapping as well. So that should be a non-issue. If it were an issue, we would be seeing that in these other devices that were back mapped in duplicate. And that's pretty much it. MIDI comes in over the TCP driver. It is interpreted as a thing, as a string. This is exactly the string that dLive sent. We're taking this last bit and interpreting that as a float range. That is then going to a fader, typically. And then in reverse, when a fader is moved, that fader corresponds to this MIDI data, which is being then, this last bit interpreted back into MIDI with that float going from 00 to 7F. Oh, one small note here. What I did find is that if this last value here doesn't correspond, it isn't written as 00, this range will be funky because it's saying, like, if it's at 01, whatever the range is between 01 and 7F is going to be 0 through 127. So your fader basically just doesn't go all the way down. So for whatever thing you have here, you do have to make sure that you have the lowest value that you need to have represented for this substitution range. Otherwise, you do get some weirdness. At any rate, I do hope that's been helpful. And I hope that answers the question that we sort of had when we last left off. Just to show you what I'm also doing with this mapping. I'm kind of going through now and doing the individual mapping for literally every fader. And then for the DCA faders, group faders, aux, mains, FX sends, returns, mutes, and the sends. It's a bit of a meticulous process. I'm only up to channel 12 on the sends. But once this is done, then we'll also have sort of this OSC library for use with dLive Midi that can be sort of used really basically anywhere you want to try and use it. Yeah, that's all I got. Hope this has been helpful.